Hi, my name is Carrie. I'm 32 years old. I had gone through a divorce a couple of years ago. As painful as the journey had been, I feel like I'm at a place where I can talk about it, so here I am. I always had a pretty average life. I was average at my studies and had average skills at everything I put my hand to. I really embodied the quote, "Jack of all trades, master of none," I guess. Like everything about me, my looks were average too. I wasn't by no means ugly, but I also wasn't the kind of person to make heads turn when I walked into a room. I grew up being comfortable with how I looked. I was never self-conscious about my looks. After all, I had successfully had a couple of really handsome boyfriends throughout high school and college. My looks never bothered me until I got into this really toxic relationship in my last year of college. Initially, my boyfriend at the time had been nice. I knew he wasn't going to be the one for me, but I dated him because I liked his company. Over time, as my feelings grew for him, I began to excuse a lot of his crappy behaviour. I was so blinded by love for him that I never really realised the kind of damage he had done to my self-esteem. By the time my relationship had come to an end, my self-esteem had shattered entirely. I could no longer look at myself because when I did, I would feel so ugly that I would start sobbing. It took me 5 years after graduating college and leaving that boyfriend for me to start dating again. The person I started seeing was my now ex-husband, Nick. We met at a bar. I had gone out to celebrate one of my friend's birthdays and happened to meet him there. I was the only one among my friends that wasn't drinking. I hated how self-confident I got when I was drunk because I could see how ugly I was when I was sober. I wanted to save myself the embarrassment, so I chose not to drink much. Nick had been the one to approach me that evening.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, hello. I'm good, thank you. How about you?
Just enjoying the vibe here. Mind if I join you? Why are you sitting alone?
I needed a break from all the dancing, celebrating a friend's birthday.
Looks like they're having a blast.
They really are. They're all single, by the way, if you're interested.
Why go to them when I'm already talking to the most beautiful girl in the world?
You must need glasses if you're talking about me.
My eyesight's fine. I could have talked to them, but I chose you.
Oh.
How about this? Give me your number, and tomorrow when we're sober, we'll grab coffee.
I like that idea. We exchanged phone numbers and carried on with small conversations before Nick had to finally leave because he had work the next day. I felt a rush of warmth flood me. No one had ever approached me like that. Even with my past relationships, I had been the one to initiate a conversation. Nick had slowly begun to chip away at my insecurities. The next day, we went to grab a coffee together as Nick had promised. The entire time, Nick made me feel like the most beautiful woman on the planet. The first thing he said to me wasn't even a hi or a how are you? He looked stunned when he saw me and said, "Wow, you're beautiful." I didn't think I could blush, but Nick always made my cheeks flush so much. I looked like I had purposely applied rouge. We began to meet each other regularly after that. We quickly began dating. I felt so loved and appreciated whenever I was with Nick. We moved in together after a year of dating. After 2 years of dating, Nick proposed to me at the coffee shop we had gone to on our first date. I said yes through tears. Our wedding was a small event where only our closest friends and family attended. Overall, our relationship was a dream come true for me. Over the 2 years that we were together, Nick had slowly rebuilt all of my broken pieces. He had told me that I was the prettiest girl in the world countless times. He made me fall in love with myself all over again. Which is why what happened later was so shocking and heartbreaking for me. During the first 2 years of our marriage, we focused on our careers. I worked with this accounting firm and made a good amount of money. It wasn't by any means an extraordinary amount, but it was more than enough to support myself. Nick, on the other hand, worked for a company that was pretty big. He earned 1.5 times what I earned, and yet he still worked towards getting even more promotions. I loved that about him, and it didn't bother me. We had decided that both of us would work as hard as we could because we wanted to start a family in the next year. True to our word, we had worked hard and had saved up a good amount of money. We started to try for a baby, and within 2 months of trying, I got pregnant. Nick and I were overjoyed. I was happy that I was living out all of my dreams. I was working my dream job, living in my dream house with my dream man, who I was going to have my dream baby with. I mean, I had it all. And of course, there was always some nervousness that came with the prospect of becoming parents for the first time. One night, after a particularly rough day at work for both of us, we lay in bed and talked about our fears of parenthood. You know, babe, sometimes I get scared thinking about being a mum. It's just overwhelming to imagine being responsible for another life.
I feel the same way. The thought of accidentally hurting our child terrifies me. One small mistake can mess them up for life.
Definitely, but kids are resilient. They're not as delicate as we think. Being scared of messing up just shows that we'll be aware of our actions and make things right when we do make mistakes.
You're right. When I think back, my father was absent a lot. It left a void that nothing could fill. I don't want that for our child.
You won't. I'll be right there with you through everything. We'll learn and grow together, and I'll hold you accountable just as I expect you to hold me.
I promise to always be there with you, my love. How did I get so lucky with you?
The feeling's mutual, babe. We're in this together, no matter what. We'll be the best parents we can be. Even though I was terrified, knowing that Nick would be by my side comforted me greatly. I knew that no matter what life threw at me, he would be there by my side. Oh, how wrong I was. A couple of months after that conversation, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. We named him Joe. The first few weeks with Joe were really hard. Joe was a fussy baby who never slept at night. Nick and I kept trading nights staying awake. It obviously began to take a toll on both of us. The lack of sleep made both of us cranky and irritable. To make matters worse, I had been diagnosed with postpartum depression, or PPD, so I was struggling. Most days I could barely get out of bed. Nick would have to take care of a lot of things. He took care of baby Joe, most of the household chores, and most of the cooking. I would do what I could as best I could, but almost every day my brain felt like a huge fog had settled over it. I felt so low and unable to function. The only thing that made me feel better was lying in bed and crying. I would obviously take care of Joe when Nick was at work, but when Nick came back home, I would happily pass Joe over to him. Thanks to PPD, I couldn't even keep my job. I sent in my resignation letter and tried my best to cope with my illness. Obviously, Nick had reached his breaking point at some point. He'd come back from work and just lashed out at me after I couldn't get Joe to stop crying.
Why can't you do better as a mother? All you do is sit around.
What are you talking about?
I'm fine with you quitting your job, but you're supposed to take care of Joe. If you can't even manage that, what's the point?
You know I have postpartum depression.
How long will you use that excuse?
Excuse? You'd think I'd lie about something as serious as this. Look at me. Do I seem like I'm enjoying any of this? Every day is a struggle and I physically ache not being able to care for Joe. I wish I could do more, but I can't.
I had a tough day at work, my love. Boss is pushing hard and I'm on the edge. Balancing it all, work and Joe, it's overwhelming.
I get it, babe. It's not easy. I'll try harder. Do more, so you don't have to bear it all.
No, I'll manage things like always.
It's been 6 months since Joe's birth. I need to take my role seriously and support you.
I don't want you to strain yourself. I'll handle things.
I want to do my part, babe, for Joe and for us. We're a team, right?
Yeah, we are. We'll figure it out together.
I started pushing myself to fight the fog in my mind. I took care of everything around the house, all while looking after Joe. The only thing that comforted me was food. I will admit that it was the reason I had put on a good 30 pounds. I had neither the time nor the energy to work off all the food I consumed, although I gradually began to notice how Nick was spending less and less time at home. Nick still did his share of the responsibilities, but he would always be working till really late at night. He would come home and be too exhausted after work to talk to me or just spend time with me. It hurt real bad. I mean, I was already struggling, but to not have the one person who was supposed to be my rock not be there next to me was painful. Every time I asked him why he was away for so long, he would tell me that he was working towards the promotion and that he was doing it for us. I wanted just one night in with him, but he just never wanted it. Even on weekends, he would lock himself up in his office and just work. Over time, I stopped asking him so much. I just got used to his absence. However, Nick surprised me one day by asking me to accompany him to a work dinner that dinner. I was so excited that Nick was finally taking me out that I went shopping and bought myself a nice dress. I got dressed up for the event and dropped off Joe at my mother's place for the night. I expected a compliment from Nick, but Nick never said anything. I let it go and hoped that Nick's spirit would be lifted at the event. At the event, I got to meet a lot of Nick's colleagues. I even got to meet his boss, Amelia. She wore a tight red gown that only accentuated her body. She looked gorgeous. She approached us with confidence and with the prettiest smile on her face. She greeted both of us with kisses on the cheek. "Hey, I'm Amelia. Are you Nick's wife?" "Yes, I am. My name's Carrie." "I thought so. I've heard so much about you." "I hope most of it's good." "Oh, definitely. You're quite the topic." "Sorry for keeping Nick buried in work. I know he'd rather be with his pretty wife." "Well, you better get him that promotion then." "Oh, believe me, he's on the edge of getting one. Very close." "That's good to hear." The entire time, Nick just looked at the ground. He refused to interact with anyone when I was with him. The second he had left me to go socialize by himself, he was open and laughing. It stung. By the time the event ended, I was beyond upset. I never brought it up, because Nick didn't seem like he wanted to talk. When Joe was a year old, he was a lot less fussy than when he was a newborn. I had a little more free time on my hands, so I decided to start looking for work. Nothing too big and something that had flexible timings. After applying to a bunch of places, I finally got a job as a content writer. It would be paid per article and I was allowed to submit however many I wanted, whenever I wanted. It was the perfect job. I excitedly told Nick about the new job that night at dinner. Nick just grunted it in response and gave me a half-hearted congrats. I didn't know why I had expected him to be excited or even just happy for me. It hurt how little he cared. I cried myself to sleep that night. After that, I was pretty occupied with Joe, the chores and work. I began to finally feel better. The fog began to lift, but there was still a huge hole in my heart that only Nick could fix. One morning I missed him a little too much. I put Joe to sleep after feeding him and walked into Nick's office. Nick was at work, but since Nick spent most of his time at home in his office, it had become his second room. I wanted to surround myself with his things because Nick wasn't giving me any of his attention. I sat in his office chair and closed my eyes for a while, just taking in his scent. When I opened my eyes again, I looked at his desk. I couldn't help my curiosity. I looked through his stuff. I was just curious about what he did in his office all day. That's when I stumbled on a manila file that looked out of place among the drawer full of loose papers. I picked it up and looked at it. To my absolute horror, I saw divorce papers. They had already been signed by Nick. The only space left blank was the place where I was supposed to sign. My heart shattered. I knew that we weren't in the best place, but I didn't think that it was this bad. I still loved Nick, despite his absence. I just thought he was stressed about work and raising a child, but to ask for a divorce, that was too much. I knew I was difficult to deal with after I gave birth to Joe, but I was really sick. I knew that there were many things I could have done differently, but at the same time, I really couldn't have done anything. I sat in his office and cried for so long that when Nick came home, he looked surprised to see me sitting there. He saw the file on the table and realized that I had found out. Nick, I need to know. Why? Because I felt like our spark had faded. Don't lie to me. The man I married would have talked to me, not just walked away. Do you really want to know the truth? Yes. For months I've been seeing someone. Amelia, my boss. Amelia? How could you? I spent so many late nights at work and it just happened. Plus, it didn't help how attractive she is. Why would you do this to me? Look at yourself. I could overlook your being poor to a certain extent, but you're not attractive anymore. You're so fat and so ugly. Pregnancy ruined you. I regret getting you pregnant. How can you regret your own son? I'd rather have a hot wife than a son. Sign the papers. I'm marrying Amelia. You're heartless. I thought you loved us. I thought you loved me. Things change, Carrie. I didn't know what came over me at that moment, but I went into our room where I packed a bunch of his things. I threw his bag at his face and told him to get out. I told him that I would contest the divorce. Without a word, Nick left. I cried the whole night. How could he do this to me? To Joe? My sadness turned into anger. Had Nick and Amelia been having an affair when I had gone to his business dinner party? Is that what she meant when she said that he would get a promotion? I wanted to break something. I took a couple of deep breaths and pulled out my laptop. I looked up Amelia and found out that she was married too. I knew that I had no proof, but I texted her husband on Facebook. I told him what I found out. I hoped that something would happen, that Nick and Amelia would face some sort of consequence. I was too tired at that point to wait for a reply, so I ended up falling asleep. The next morning, I forced myself not to look at any of my screens. I busied myself with taking care of Joe and working. I needed to earn good money to afford a lawyer. In the afternoon, I had a visitor. It was a man that looked about the same age as me. He looked like he hadn't slept. I immediately recognized him as Amelia's husband, Jerry. He awkwardly asked me if he could come in, and I let him in. We sat down in the living room.
How are you holding up?
I'm okay, I guess. Still trying to wrap my head around everything.
Yeah, I know what you mean. This whole situation is a mess.
So why did you come over?
Well, after your text, Amelia and I had a massive fight. I'm here partly because I needed to get out of my place, and partly because I thought maybe you'd want to get revenge on them with me.
Revenge?
Yeah, they both hurt us deeply. I figured maybe we could give them a taste of their own medicine.
Count me in. Nick not only betrayed me, but he also hurt our son.
I'm with you on that. Both of them need to understand the pain they caused. We can show them what it feels like.
Definitely. We can't let this slide.
We deserve to feel this way.
Agreed. Following the conversation, we began planning how to get our revenge. Jerry told me that he knew a couple of people in the higher positions of Amelia and Nick's company. Turns out, he's the one who recommended Amelia for the position and got her the job. Amelia must have been really stupid to cheat on her husband with a co-worker, knowing that he was the one who got her the job. In the meantime, we tried to collect as much evidence as we could of the affair. Jerry told me that he had access to all of Amelia's messages because she had her phone synced with their iPad, which allowed him to see everything on her phone. He also helped me get a real great lawyer. The next few weeks were hectic. I went to court for the divorce. Thanks to my lawyer, who presented a great case of neglect, I had the judge's favour. In the middle of the trial, Jerry and I began our next phase of the plan. He contacted his friends at Amelia and Jerry's firm. He informed them of Amelia's gross conduct. In a few days, the two of them were fired. Now, not only did I have proof of Nick's neglect, but also proof of his unemployment. That was the final nail in the coffin. I won the court's favour and granted full custody of Joe. I was entitled to more than half of our marital assets, which meant that I could be more than financially stable for a while. Nick and Amelia found out what Jerry and I had done, and obviously, they tried to contact us. They left us messages and emails about how heartless we were, but Jerry and I ignored it. Jerry and I began to hang out a lot after this entire ordeal. We bonded over our heartbreak and betrayal. Eventually, we realized we had feelings for each other. I guess Nick's constant neglect of me made me lose my love for him, and his actions afterward only sealed the deal. Jerry and I started dating a year after everything that had happened, and we still are to this day. Jerry is great with Joe, and has accepted him as his own son. A year and a half after Jerry and I started dating, Nick reached out to me. He had stopped trying to contact me 2 months after the court hearing, since I never replied. He asked me if we could meet at the cafe near my place. After a little back and forth with Jerry, we decided we wanted to know what made Nick want to meet me. So I texted Nick and told him that I would meet him. We arranged to meet the next day. When I saw Nick, he looked haggard, like he hadn't been sleeping or eating. I have to admit that I felt really satisfied to see him look like that. What's up? Make it quick. Jerry's waiting for me outside.
Jerry? Why is he waiting for you?
Oh, we're together.
You got angry with me for sleeping with my boss, and here you are sleeping with her ex-husband?
I got together with Jerry after what you and Amelia had done. Our relationship was completely over when Jerry and I started dating. It's very different from what you did. Is this why you called me?
No. This is very embarrassing, but Amelia and I are pregnant.
Okay, and?
We're struggling a lot, like financially. It's putting a strain on our relationship. Do you think you could help me out a little?
Are you out of your mind? You're right. It's embarrassing that you're asking your ex-wife to lend you money to help support your affair partner's baby. You're pathetic, Nick. Never contact me again. I couldn't believe his audacity. I walked out of that cafe with my head held high. I felt beyond satisfied that I walked out of all the heartbreak with the best outcomes. I had a loving boyfriend and an amazing son. I was working a good job that paid me well thanks to Jerry. I don't know what happened to Nick and Amelia, nor do I want to. I'm happy with the life I have, and I've decided that I want to put my past away. The entire thing prompted me to reinvent myself, and now, here I am, a completely different and better person. Thank you for listening to me.